Thank you. And now I'm not going to make a prepared presentation. I would like to share some deliberations together with you. Most of you are journalists here, so I would like to express some of my ideas to think together with you about this phenomenon which we're discussing now. I want to make use of my free status as a status of a scholar and to speak together with you on this subject. We're now discussing a terrible evil, and it is threatening us all. It is threatening the Islamic world and Russia too, because one of our foot is in the Islamic world, the other is in the Christian world. We're a Eurasian nation, a nation which at the same time is a Christian nation and a Muslim nation. And our Muslim Ummah is part, first of all, of the Russian society, but also it is part which is closely connected with the Islamic world. And when we observe this terrorism, it is Islamic. Of course, it's a wrong word. We shouldn't even use the word jihadism, because the word jihad has a good connotation. It's interesting when nice words, good words, or words from the Arabic language, as a result of the terrorist activity, they acquire a negative connotation. These are such words as jihadism or the word jama'ah, which is definitely has a positive connotation. But now in many European languages, when people use this word jamaat, they think of awful terrorists with Kalashnikov machine guns or knives cutting off people's heads. This is awful, and maybe this is the objective of these terrorists. They want to alienate Muslims from the other parts of humanity, and which is terrible for our society too. And when we study this phenomenon, we all do. I have been doing this for many years. I can't even tell you how many years I have been studying the problems of the Islamic world. So in our studies, we constantly ask ourselves this question: why is it happening now? Why not earlier? Maybe it was somewhere on the margin, but it was not mainstream. And even Khalifatism, where there is nothing terrible. Of course, there is some kind of utopia here. It's obvious that there can't be a global caliphate like there can't be any other global state, no matter what kind of state. In the 1920s, and there was the Arab Renaissance, when there were thinkers who promoted some ideas, but it did not embrace any terrorism. These were just their ideas, and people had every right to express their ideas. They played a certain role in mobilizing Muslims. But why nowadays we're witnessing this terrible phenomenon? Quite often we fail to get an answer, to have an answer to our questions. Maybe journalists can help us. But I think that journalists in their work could be more active in looking for solutions to this enigma, to this phenomenon. Why is it happening now? There are many explanations. I won't mention them all. Some explanations say that this is due to some social and economic reasons. And our chairman has mentioned already these reasons. I won't mention them again, the so-called structural reasons. There are some people who suggest that the reasons are political. First of all, the Arab-Israeli conflict, which has not been settled, and the Palestine problem has not been solved yet, has not been settled. Both statements are absolutely correct. Or some people see the logic in the activity of the Western countries, which destroyed cruelly the Oriental societies. The Oriental societies have been living in peace for many years, and they used to be the platform of the Arab world. And there were three: Egypt, Syria, Iraq in the Arab world. And when two of them nowadays are in a very tearful state. And let us be frank, there are serious problems in Egypt as well, which the present authorities find very difficult to solve. not mentioning Yemen or Libya, which are completely destroyed. It's obvious that Western interference gives reason for people to believe that the West is responsible for the destruction under the slogan of disseminating democracy, promoting democracy, and eliminating totalitarian regimes. But the results are quite contrary, and nobody knows how to restore these states. And the Western activity contributed to the upsurge of Islamism. And there is another explanation, third type, ideological explanation, putting some responsibility on certain movements in Islam, certain interpretations of Islam. We can go on forever, for a long time, say that all religions are good, Islam is good. I am a specialist in Islam, though I am a Christian, but I love Islam. No religion contains calls for massacre, for atrocities, for killings. But people have appeared who interpret religion in this way, and they promote the argument, saying that religion does have such calls. And I regret to say that the Muslim clergy that do not always contradict, do not always oppose these ideas, do not always rebuff such ideas, show the real nature of such interpretations. Quite often moderate, and I would say normal clergy just give way, don't oppose. They are either intimidated, they are either afraid of this radical movement, or they're not as active, as intensive. So there is something in these theories which is close to the hearts of young people, and we do not always quite understand why it is happening this way. And it's interesting when we discuss this with our Western colleagues, what is the process of indoctrination nowadays, brainwashing nowadays? In the past, it was through publications, television, but nowadays, the main way of indoctrination or brainwashing for people who live in Europe, it's either through social networks, through the internet, or through prisons. Where people serve their sentences. It's true of our country as well. This can be a private problem too, how we can prevent recruitment by these organizations, and we have to call them jihadist. We have not found a better word. So this problem remains very urgent, how to oppose this recruitment. When one person who spends some time in prison, he is released, but his inmates also become his followers. So one person creates 20 persons of the same attitudes. And what is to be done with social networks? In my lectures, my students tell me they don't want television anymore. My generation, we still watch television, but younger generation do not. They spend their time in the internet, and after that, they become real zombies. They are absolutely brainwashed. So everything depends on what you watch, what you get access to. There is no censorship here in our country, and there are certain sites, it's understandable, what kind of sites are pornography, violence, and this propaganda gets through with the propaganda of such evil ideas. Sometimes this propaganda is not easy to identify. Sometimes I see literature which is disseminated at schools, for example, in the Islamic schools, universities, in the mosques. And sometimes Muslim scholars cannot give a definite answer whether these books are allowed or should not be allowed, whether this is propaganda of extremism or not. Even some books which come from a number of states and they reach Russia, even these books quite often are very, very harmful. I think this flow of literature is very difficult to stop. So what is important is to create a barrier in the minds of the people who read these books or spend their time in social networks. How do journalists work in social networks? I think this is a very interesting question, a very serious problem. Do journalists really operate in the social networks? Because this is a real revolution in the information space when journalists really are not required. I don't want to hurt your feelings. You're all great journalists, but when any person can press a button and have a direct contact with Baghdadi and read what he has said in his mosque. And how can we oppose it? How can we resist it if a person found some ideas which are close to his sentiments? Of course, factors of indoctrination also include Islamophobia, which is witnessed, I regret to say, in the Western societies. And the input of the right-wing politicians in politics as a result of Islamophobia. This is very dangerous phenomenon. It is welcomed by radicals. I often visit countries in the Middle East, and I see that radicals love this tendency because it provides for them a new inflow of people to jihadists, to radicals movement. So any feeling of hurt can be used to their advantage. I will give you just one illustration. One of our parliamentarians, a respected person, suggested introducing capital punishment for terrorism in our country. And I saw the response of those terrorists to this proposal who live beyond the country. They're very happy with this idea because then a terrorist will find itself in heaven because this is exactly what they need to die from the hands of infidelis. So it's very important to understand the mentality of these people when parliamentarians make such proposals. People are prepared to die for the sake of their faith. And we should oppose something very wise here and need the support of the Muslim clergy. And fighting radicalism should originate in the Islamic world too. Should originate not with other people who can be friendly, but they are beyond the Islamic world because they will not be trusted. What is important is that the life of the Muslims in the non-Muslim societies, where they are a minority, should be comfortable and convenient. The existence should be comfortable, and it's important too. And I think the Russian model, in the first place Tatarstan, which is so well represented here, where for centuries people have lived side by side, the people of the Orthodox faith and Muslims. And another very brief matter I want to focus on briefly, and this is the responsibility of the journalists. I think that sometimes we hear irresponsible statements in mass media in various states. I won't mention them because such irresponsible statements can also contribute to stirring up hysteria, hatred, and prevent comfortable coexistence of various confessions, of various ethnic groups. And religion definitely is closely connected with the social, economic, ethnic problems. And here, of course, the responsibility of the journalists in the world where there is no censorship, practically speaking. So this responsibility is very important. So a code of ethics, and we constantly take up this problem after Charlie Hebdo. And one more thing, and this is discord. Two items to mention: discord, this internal conflict in Islam, which was fueled by external interference. And it's also very important for Islamic journalists to contribute. We see how painful it is. And the attitude towards political Islam. Different attitude exists, and in our country there is also a discussion of this problem. And it's very important how journalists are going to cover this problem.